this computer. Hi, I'm Analisa, and we're back with Esoteric Book Club. We're reading Cycles of Opportunity by Carol Beckham, and we are going over Chapter 7, which I believe is all about the planets. So Chapter 7 is called Solar and Planetary Energy. This chapter is pretty short, which I like, so I feel like we probably won't have to have a super long meeting unless we feel like it, but she just kind of starts out the book talking about the way that the planets are kind of influencing us in relation to the sun and the moon, and kind of the difference between the sun and the moon and the planets. And it is really confusing because you still have to kind of wrap your head around the concept of veiling, which I think I'm starting to understand, but we'll talk about that a little bit. So Chapter 7 is the focus, and then I'm going to see if there's anything else before that. Nope, I'll just share my screen. We've got some images here. Let's just do this. And then here, can you guys see this evolution of a solar logos? Okay, cool. So I was kind of irritated because there is an image that I know exists that I've seen in Alice Bailey's books. I think it's one of her books, and it shows the first part that we're going to talk about in Chapter 7, which is this concept that our solar system is a part of 7 other solar systems. And you can kind of see it. I'm not really sure if this diagram is doing that, and I didn't have time to fully study exactly what this is, but this was the closest one I could find that represents what I remember seeing, but I couldn't find that exact one. So essentially, this would be our solar system here, and then this would be kind of everything that we're studying right now and the breakdown of it in terms of all the different planes, if you see. So it's pretty, again, like so before we were recording, we were just talking about how some of this stuff is really difficult to understand or grasp in the beginning. And again, like looking at this concept, it's like, obviously this is all the 7 rays, right? And then it's showing all the planes that we've been talking about and the way that those 7 rays move through the elements. And then it's breaking down. This says the 7 cosmic logi, each containing 7 solar logos. So essentially the solar logos is the sun. The sun is a star, and each sun has its own solar system. And then our sun is on a current state of evolution within that. And if you see, I'm putting this out there, I might be wrong, but this looks like it could be the 4th dimension or the 4th plane of reality. So we'll talk a lot about 5th dimension, 6th dimension. And I think that from this perspective, it's showing that like we're leaving the 3rd dimension. We left the 3rd dimension, now we're on the 4th dimension, which is congruent with a lot of other weird esoteric reading out there when you get into that stuff. So I wish the other graph was here, but this is kind of showing that too a little bit. So in the beginning of Chapter 7, there's a quote by Alice Bailey that says, "The system will then be characterized by a blaze of refulgent glory and by a radiation that will link it up with its cosmic center and thus affect the liberation of the sun and his return to the far distant source from whence the primal impulse originated." I kind of feel like that quote has to do with going through like states of evolution and then becoming one with the all again, and for whatever reason. Our sun is a member of a constellation that the Tibetan teacher calls the 7 solar systems, of which ours is one. So meaning ours is part of that 7. These 7 solar systems comprise the centers of the body of a vast intelligence, and these centers work together to bring in the cosmic energies appropriate to that great being and deflect other energies that are not needed. They then step these energies down, modifying, qualifying, and adapting them all for the lesser lives within their area of responsibility. She then says too later on that the 7 solar systems correspond to the 7 sacred planets in our own solar system, and the 7 human chakras correspond on a much lesser scale to these greater centers. So the planets are like the mini little energies that embody this first initial 7, and then we are, as humans, on a microcosm level, embody that 7. So everything is that 7 to start out with, and a very base level that make us who we are. So it's kind of interesting to think about, because like if we were to think about microcosm, macrocosm, I'm just going to get real woo with it. You guys can tell me what you think. Like maybe we're like, the 4th chakra is the heart chakra. And if you think about like, what if we were in the body of another entity and this was their 7 chakras and we live within the heart of this body or something like that? It kind of is how it feels. Like whatever our all being is has this 7, you know, system that's pulling from it to gain power or whatever it needs, and it helps deflect whatever it doesn't need. And if we think about us building a relationship to our own chakras, that's essentially what we're learning to do. You know, like we'll learn that if we need to have a better relationship to money, that we need to work on our root chakra. Or we'll learn that if we need to have a better relationship to love, we need to work on our heart chakra. If we've got trauma and repressed memories, that's in the sacral. If we have a hard time initiating or directing, that's the solar plexus. We have a hard time speaking, the throat chakra. And so I think that it's kind of interesting to see it that way within us, and then also seeing that as a collective within our solar system, that we are potentially in like our own chakra journey, figuring out that particular chakra. And it would be interesting if this was the heart chakra, because of just the fact that the more that we kind of learn that like what humans are supposed to be learning is compassion and love and peace, and the way the Palladian channelers kind of talk, it's like we're all here trying to reach this state of harmony. And in this book, they talk about reaching a state of harmony through conflict and the benefit of that. So once it's said that you move past the 4th dimension, you start moving more towards those understandings, and things are less separate. People are less you versus me, or seeing everyone outside of themselves, and more unified, if that makes sense. But that's just my theory. I don't actually know if that represents the heart chakra or anything. I just think that would be interesting. Then after that first page, we just go right into the sun. Do you guys want to talk about that first page at all, and kind of that concept or how it resonated for you? No? All right, cool. We'll move on. So we start with the sun. I have some fun images of all the planets. So the sun. The quote in the beginning is, unveil to us the face of the true spiritual sun, hidden by a disk of golden light, that we may know the truth and do our whole duty as we journey to thy sacred feet. So the sun in exoteric astrology represents the self, and it also is related to the father. And a lot of the reasoning behind that is because the sun represents primordial fire, life force, vitality. It gives us life. And at some point in our consciousness or state of evolution, we realized that the sun was why we were able to be alive. We realized that there's some reason that the sun keeps coming up, and because of the sun's warmth and that continuous rising, it gives life to everything. Because if it weren't for light and it weren't for the sun, then we would all freeze to death and die. Nothing would grow, and we wouldn't have daytime to get things done. So the sun is a big thing for us. And in most scripture, when we say he is risen and, you know, the Son of God, all of that, it's actually, it actually means, you know, if we go way back, the actual sun. So that's something that a lot of Christians don't know about their own religion, which is funny to me and sad at the same time. I'm like, he has risen, but it's not who you think it is, or is it? I don't know. But it makes me more compassionate towards the origin of Christianity. But yeah, the mysteries and why they had to hide all that is kind of annoying. So in this chapter, they say our calendars were measured in solar cycles, and our astrology is based on the equinoctial and solstical, I can't say certain words, points, you know what I'm saying, the solstices and the equinoxes, the cardinal points of the seasons, when the length of the days and the evenings are the same, and when the sun shines for the longest and the shortest times of the year. This is the whole foundation of tropical astrology, emphasizing the fact that our lives and much of our consciousness are based on the rhythms of the seasons within the realm of he within whom we live and move and have our being. And so that's a big thing too, like with astrology, is that we're studying tropical astrology is based off the seasons. And so that's kind of where like astronomy and astrology will collide, because what's actually happening astronomically won't coincide with what's happening in astrology. But that's because in astrology, we're following it from, you know, that Gregorian tropical study. And there's other types of astrology that have, you know, like sidereal astrology and true sidereal astrology are studying the constellations. And, you know, so that's when we'd actually be studying what's happening more scientifically in the sky. It's more constellation focused. And so it's kind of interesting because, again, esoteric astrology is kind of blending some of these things, and it's showing how to use all of it in succession, but in a completely different way that is definitely not, you know, it's more spiritual than scientific. The sun is the mode of enterprise and the vehicle of expression for a great life called our solar logos. His purpose, which he achieves on indescribable cosmic levels, is gaining experience, making contact, developing full self-knowledge, achieving full mastery or control, attaining manhood cosmically, expanding his consciousness. Our solar system is a system of love wisdom, and these energies are manifested through the heart center. So I guess maybe when I read that, I must have remembered that on a subconscious level, because that's kind of what she's validating we were talking about in the beginning, was our solar system being on the heart level. And she just said that that's what we are. Uh-oh. There we go. That wasn't supposed to be on there, sorry. I lost my sun picture. Let's see what else she says. Pranic energies emanating from the physical sun, producing physical and vital energies upon us. So that's one of the primary types of solar energy. And then the other type, soul energies emanating from the heart of the sun, sweeping through the planets in 7 great streams and producing the sensitivity that we call awareness. The heart of the sun is referred to by the Tibetan is not the heart center of the sun. Instead, it represents the soul of the sun, whereas the physical sun represents the body, and the central spiritual sun represents the monad or spirit of the great triple being. From the love wisdom ray of the sun, 7 subrays of energy radiate. These subrays correspond to the 7 major rays and produce the 7 types of souls, giving us 7 fields of expression and 7 grades of consciousness. As we come under the influence of our soul ray, we then come under the influence of one of the 7 solar systems and one of the 7 sacred planets. So that's kind of interesting, because I guess we'd find our soul ray in our charts again, which I think is connected to our esoteric planet in our chart, or maybe whatever our triangle is. I'm still learning that stuff and don't really get how to totally delineate our chart with esoteric astrology. But whatever our soul ray is, it sounds like would have a lot to do with how those sub-rays influence us. So we can kind of see how that breakdown is on that graph. It makes a little more sense now. The sun is exalted in Aries. The sun acts on the exoteric, esoteric, and hierarchical levels with energies from Leo, where Jupiter represents the exoteric personality level, or the physical sun. Neptune represents the esoteric soul level, the heart of the sun, and Uranus represents the hierarchical group level, the central spiritual sun. The keynotes for the sun are vitality, creativity, and life force. I find that really interesting, especially as a Leo with really strong Jupiter placements. And then I have Neptune and Uranus in my first house, in my identity house. So I thought that was a really interesting breakdown, just because I think I identify a lot with those energies in my own chart. I haven't figured out exactly where my soul ray is yet, but I don't know if you guys, when you were reading any of this, maybe you not, Christine, but I don't know, Danielle, if you were reading any of this and it made you reflect on anything in your chart with the planets.
I feel like probably more as we go through the other planets that I'll start to jog my memory a little bit. My soul planet ruler is Vulcan.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, interesting, since it's an invisible or hidden planet, or just a point of a lot of energy. But yeah, I thought that I think the most interesting thing, one of the most interesting things that she mentioned, it was just this one line under the sun, was that heartfelt intentions evoke a certain amount of protection by the soul. And I just thought that line was really beautiful, like, in terms of kind of when we try to manifest or create something that's truly from the heart, and kind of thinking, like you were talking about the sun, our solar system maybe being the heart center of, these 7 solar systems that are connected, and, kind of moving from your heart chakra or heart space, kind of tapping into that energy. I don't know. Yeah, I found it really interesting.
Yeah, I love that quote. That's really good. There was something else I was going to ask you guys. Did you guys end up finding where Vulcan was in your chart?
I did. I think mine's in Aries.
Interesting, because mine's in Leo.
Weird.
I wonder if that, so where Vulcan supposedly, when it was discovered, it was seen as a black dot against the sun. So it would have been really close to the sun. And I mean, obviously, like with orbiting, it doesn't, like, I don't know if it's just one of those things that would stay close with the time of year, if that makes sense. Do you know what I mean? Like if everyone's Vulcan is in the same sign as their sun sign. But I was curious about that for you guys, because I was like, I've looked at my Vulcan before, but it was a while ago and I totally forgot. And then I looked it up again and was like, what? That's crazy. And so yours being Aries is crazy too. Because I'm saying that because Danielle's an Aries. She's Aries sun. I'm Leo sun. So my Vulcan's in Leo. Her Vulcan's in Aries. Are sun signs. I can look up yours for you, Christine. Or are you looking it up right now?
I was looking it up right now.
Okay. Well, I'll let you know. You've got it, right? All right. Let us know when you find it. Anybody else have anything to say about the sun in this chapter? You feel good? Move on. All right. So then we get into the planet. So one of the things that she does talk about once we get past the sun is that the sun is a star. And then the moon also isn't a planet. It's the moon. It's a moon. And so the reason why the sun and the moon veil other planets is because they're not technically planets, but they're very important to us being alive. So the sun is obviously like our vital life force energy. We can't live without it. And then, from a scientific perspective, we also can't live without our moon. The science and the math with where the moon is at in relation to the earth as well as the sun is so important to the fact that we're able to have life here on earth. And there's a lot of theories that the moon was actually put here on this earth on purpose to create life here, and that another consciousness, another being knew, you know, like basically this, our planet was created, you know, with a very specific intention, and then in order to do that, everything mathematically has to be in a certain alignment. And we know for a fact that if the sun was, you know, if the earth was any closer to the sun or any further away, we wouldn't have us. And that if we didn't have the moon, we wouldn't have us, because the gravitational pull between the earth, the moon, and the sun is what gives us this ecosystem and this atmosphere that enables us to be alive. And so the sun and the moon veil all the other planets for that reason, because those are the two that are the most critical to us being here, and they kind of outshine everything else. But the sun and the moon being so, like, I kind of think of the way that I'm reading this, and if you guys have anything to add to it, let me know. But the way that it feels to me is that, especially when we look at transpersonal and traditional astrology from a personality perspective, the sun and the moon are so important to our personality. So like the sun is that sense of self, and then the moon is that emotional need, that emotional body. And in esoteric astrology, it said that the moon is kind of a weakness or a crutch, because it's our emotional needs. So it can kind of like get in the way of what we're supposed to accomplish, because it's what we, it's like our you know, Achilles heel a little bit. And so I feel like when she says that we're supposed to evolve through the other planets that the sun and the moon veils, it's essentially, I think, kind of saying that once we've gotten over ourselves and we can get past the sun and the moon in ourselves, then we can start to expand beyond and into these esoteric or soul-centered spaces. And that's how, and the other planets are how we do that, how we evolve in our soul evolution or consciousness. So that to me is kind of cool to understand it from, because I think that the concept of veiling was a little bit confusing to me in the beginning. I didn't really understand why, and then she kind of explains it here. So the quote in the beginning: the goal for the evolution of man is group consciousness as exemplified by a planetary logos. The goal for the planetary logos is God consciousness as exemplified by the solar logos. So I feel like, you know, if we think about Buddhism and trying to reach nirvana or samadhi, we're always trying to unify with God. We're trying to unify with source. And it says that the, you know, the goal of us would be to reach that state like our sun has, essentially. So the sun has reached that state. The sun is the god of its solar system. Everything revolves around it. And it is now, you know, it's like a heart that emanates life force onto everything else. So brightly so that it outshines and veils everything, right? And for us in our microcosm, our goal is to reach that state within the self and enlightenment, right? The sun is illumined, so we're trying to find our own enlightenment. 7 planets were known in ancient humanity who observed their motions in the sky against the backdrop of fixed stars. In mythology, the planets were the lesser gods who fought, loved, argued, and cooperated amongst themselves, and who brought humanity various forms of knowledge and wisdom. These planetary lords, with their variety of characteristics and qualities as perceived by humanity, influence the nuances of our culture. Today, these planetary archetypes still influence us through these great thought forms of how men and women should behave. Because we all have the same expectations to a large degree, the thought forms of antiquity still persist in large measure. Certain planets are said to rule certain characteristics of life, which is where we get the concept of planetary rulers. These expectations largely hold true on our personality level, but as we evolve and begin to link in with the higher archetypes of the soul, the influence of the traditional planetary rulers is more elective, and we control our lives to a large degree. So I think part of why I've always been drawn to esoteric astrology and why I love esoteric astrology is that I'm the kind of person that is always looking for the door out. I'm like, how do I get the fuck off of this crazy ass wheel, you know? And I think that intuitively my soul knows that there's karma. Like this isn't it. There's something afterwards. And I think that my soul is frustrated. Like, it's like, how do I crack this code and get off of here? And esoteric astrology tends to be an answer to that. It tends to say, like, if you just can evolve past yourself and your ego and your personality and, you know, understand these key things, then you'll crack the seal and you'll kind of evolve into this next plane of existence. So that's essentially what she's saying, is that when we go into, you know, evolving through the other planets and we get past the drama or the, you know, kind of hubbub of our personalities, we're not holding on so rigidly to our personality self. We're able to reach this other state of consciousness and get off of the loop that we're stuck in. And it's a very empowering feeling, because a lot of times with astrology, we'll be like, well, this is just how I am because my sun's in Leo, or my Mercury's in whatever, or I've got this square, so I can't, you know, help it. And of course it's hard when you see how often when we have a transit and then we're under that influence of that transit, it feels like no matter how much we're trying to evolve or grow, we're just under that influence of that transit. And then it kind of makes you wonder, you know, how much do we have a say in this? And even with a lot of the enlightened yogis that, you know, said astrology was a bunch of hubbub, you can look at their charts during certain things happening in their lives and you'll see, you know, even them being skeptical about it will make sense in relation to their chart. So I think that that's a whole other side of all of it that's really fascinating. But I think too, that's part of like what's helping us evolve, right? Is kind of that's us when we're in the transit, going through the experiential part to obtain the soul evolution, because we can't just know it. We have to experience it, and then we have to make the choices. The dharma has to line up with the knowledge. It can't just be, you know, one or the other. There's 7 points that all have to line up, I guess, right? That sucks. Yeah, so I think that's kind of what she's saying here. Anybody want to add anything else about the chapter that she's talking about here with the planets? Just kind of, I've made a lot of notes, but we can move on. Good, all right. Well, the main note before we go into the triangles that I did want to talk about is she says eventually there will be 12 sacred planets corresponding to the 12 constellations. And essentially it said that they just haven't been discovered yet, which if you think about it, like when the 7 concept with 7 chakras was made, we hadn't discovered the outer planets yet. And traditional astrology just sticks to the 7. And I know for me in my own personal studies, I've gotten past the 7. I'm now I've read more about up to 10 about, I think, in the chakras. And I've experienced, I think, up to 9 in the chakras for myself personally. And we also do know that there are other planets that they've discovered in our solar system. They're not talking about it and they're not adding it to our curriculum because they don't want to break. First, this is my projection. They don't want to fuck up what they've been teaching for so long, you know, because it would mess everything up. But Ceres is a planetoid, and Chiron is a planetoid, and there are multiple other planets in our solar system that are even bigger than Pluto. And we have a ton of asteroids. There's so much going on that we're learning the base level of things. And obviously with the 7, I think that that's accurate, but I do find it interesting that that's in there, that eventually there will be 12, because I think that that's a more accurate depiction of where we're headed. And I think that, you know, give another couple thousand years, if humans are still around, astrology is probably going to look a lot different or be a lot more complex. So I feel like we're still at a very like base level of understanding with that, and with what we're using too. And then too, it's also, I always think it's important to remember that this is always from our perspective on Earth. So we have 12 constellations that we use in tropical astrology, but there's a ton of other constellations that you can use in other ways, obviously like the Big Bear, the Pleiades, and then that's also, those constellations look that way only from our perspective. If we went on another planet, their astrology would be completely different with the same planets even, you know, so it's only really congruent to our experience here. And I think that also says a lot about evolving like out of that. And like, I think I get upset with human perception a lot is because we're so self-centered and focused on being humans that we forget that like all of our laws and our rules and our science and our math is really only makes sense and exists here with our specific makeup and gravitational pull and all of that. You get out there and it's total, the rules are gone, you know, like we don't know what the fuck is going on. And I think that's this too, is kind of just reminding us, like, get out of the sun and the moon, start looking out there at these other planets, and you're gonna find that shit's way crazier than you could have ever imagined. And then, you know, moving past the 7 too. And I think too, if we think about the 7 are in the body, so those other ones are out of the body. And if you think about what Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, the, you know, I guess 8, 9, 10, that those are the outer planets, and they do represent kind of these more out there states of consciousness. Okay, cool. So planetary triangles. She brings up chapter 9 again. So I went to chapter 9 because I felt like we obviously need chapter 9 for some reason. This is the graph that she's talking about. That chapter is called Timing, Relationships, and Karmic Opportunity. The configuration of the triangle represents aspects of the 3 major energies in the universe and relates to spirit and synthesis. It is an expression of a fixed consciousness focused in reality. I think that's all I wanted to say. The 7 planetary logi who are in charge of the planets in our solar system are the 7 centers of the body of the solar logos, bearing to him a relationship similar to that borne by the masters and their affiliated groups to a particular planetary logos. Kundalini in the solar system vivifies these centers, and at this stage of development, certain planetary centers are more closely allied than others. Following are some of the important planetary triangular configurations that the Tibetan specifically points out to us for our study. So there's a lot, more than what's on this list. And so I am just going to read what they all are. And then I'm only going to read the ones that I felt like were especially interesting. But the first one is the triangle of Saturn, Mercury, and Uranus. And this triangle relates to the evolution and destination of the human family, and after a certain stage of evolution, provides more specific energies to develop self and spiritual consciousness. These are the destination planets of 2 major triangular configurations of energy coming from the Great Bear, Sirius, and the Pleiades, and through 9 constellations in total. These configurations are depicted in 2 diagrams under triangles, trines, in chapter 9. So that's this one. And then the next one's triangle of Venus, Earth, and Saturn. The next one is triangle of Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn. Then there's triangle of Earth, Mercury, and Mars. And then this next one, which is a little bit longer, so I'm going to read it, is triangle of the Sun, the Moon, and Neptune. This esoteric triangle of force affects us in Leo and expresses rays 2, 4, and 6. Where these 3 are dominantly active, there is an inner alignment and attitude which forces open the door into the holy place. Neptune through ray 6 governs the astral plane of desire. When Neptune is active in Leo, we can transmute emotion, desire into love, aspiration, and orient ourselves to the soul. This orientation is brought by the sublimating the influence of the moon, the symbol of the form nature, and emphasizing the sun or will aspect. So I think that's interesting because we're trying to evolve through the sun, moon, and get to Neptune. So that's kind of just bringing back some of the other stuff I was talking about in the beginning. Then we have the triangle of Vulcan, Neptune, Uranus. the triangle of Earth, Mars, and Pluto, the triangle of Mars, Mercury, and Uranus, the triangle of Neptune, Venus, and Jupiter, triangle of Saturn, Neptune, and Uranus, and triangle of Sun, Uranus, Neptune. So it's a lot, and each one has a little thing about it, which I feel like we have to talk about all the other planets still, so I didn't want to read each one, but the last one, that's the triangle of Sun, Uranus, Neptune, does say conscious, integrated people can function with full occult knowledge and also with mystical perception when the influences focused through the Sun, Uranus, and Neptune are carried forward adequately in their lives. So the whole thing just kind of goes over how when different triangles are activated and in operation, we're able to accomplish certain things through spiritual evolution. Then we get into the process of veiling. In esoteric astrology, the Tibetan introduces a very mysterious process called veiling, where the sun and the moon veil certain planets and are the exoteric symbols for certain esoteric forces. He states that at present, many of us have not developed the sensitivity to receive energies from Vulcan, Neptune, and Uranus, all sacred planets, embodying Ray 1, 6, and 7. Respectively, these planets determine or condition the physical, astral, and mental natures, thus creating the personality. They form a triangle of immense creative potency. As evolution proceeds, these planets will not be veiled. So once we evolve out of ourself, our personality, then the planets will be in action. And then it kind of goes into what we already talked about with the sun being a star, not a planet, and the moon also not being a planet. And so where it says whenever the moon veils a planet, the moon itself still influences us from the personality angle and also influences mass humanity. But the planet that is veiled influences the soul or spiritual level of those who can respond to its vibrations. And then she gives a summary of veilings mentioned by the Tibetan, followed by the specific references. I should have taken a picture of this one too, but it just shows kind of what planets are veiled and then what planet's veiling. So obviously it's only going to be veiled by the moon or the sun. So Neptune, Vulcan, Uranus, and Neptune and Uranus are veiled by the moon and the sun. And then Jupiter is veiled by the sun. And then Cancer is veiled by the moon. The cardinal cross is veiled by the sun. The constellation Leo is veiled by the sun. Virgo is veiled by the moon. Aquarius is veiled by the moon. Taurus is veiled by the moon. And then it just shows what's esoteric and what's exoteric. So, and then it kind of breaks down all of that in the book too, and why it veils. But it's a lot to talk about, I feel like, for this discussion, because she goes into like each one and why it veils. And it's just, this is the stuff where I feel like this would be easy to just kind of tune out and have none of it resonate until you've read it 5 million times, because then it's also where like I start looking at my chart and I go like, what's feeling, do I feel that way? And I feel like in the beginning when I was saying like I see where Uranus, Neptune is in my chart and where my sun is and where Vulcan is, and then I think about the houses, and we haven't even gotten into houses yet, and I can feel like I can kind of almost sense or feel like where this is at, but then adding the triangle aspect to it is like a whole nother thing I haven't even gotten to.
Yeah.
Analisa, I just wanted to clarify, and I'm sorry, Danny, if I cut you off. You were saying that Cancer's veiled by, Leo's veiled by, but are they really veiled? I thought it was more just that the planets were veiled, and then they're just saying it's reference to that constellation, or is it?
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, I think it's just
veiled in those signs.
What do you say, Danny?
Is it that the planets are veiled in those signs?
Or are they just veiled always? That's the one thing that I'm a little bit confused by.
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe it's veiled in that sign.
I don't know. Also, triangles. Do you think, so is this like when we're talking about triangles, or are we just talking about like the 120-degree like trine? Or are we talking about other triangles? Because like a yod is a triangle. There's like the Thor's hammer. Like there's different astrological shapes that are triangles, not necessarily just trines.
I didn't even interpret it as an aspect at all.
I don't think it's an aspect.
Okay.
I think that, and that's the part that makes delineating
It's
really
esoteric.
difficult. Yeah, because I think that it's its own thing.
Okay.
So I'm just gonna break down a little bit of Alice Bailey's background.
Break it down, girl.
Break it down.
Yeah, break it down.
Alice Bailey wrote, like, I think it's 27 books that were all channeled. And I say channeled like that. I shouldn't. I believe in channeling, but you know what I'm saying. Like, there's obviously I channel, but I just do that because it's like, how much of what you channel should we take seriously? You know what I mean? Like, I've channeled tons of stuff where I'm just like, I'm gonna just not pay attention to that right now. I think Alice Bailey's an incredibly talented person. When I read her writing, it really does resonate with my soul. I don't know why, but one of the things that resonates with my soul the most about Alice A. Bailey's work is that every book starts out with needing to use high levels of discernment. And these books themselves say that if these are not resonant to wherever the future is headed, that they should be thrown away. And I love that. And so that's why I'm like that about them, because that's what they literally say to do. So Alice A. Bailey channeled all these books. There's a lot of Eastern philosophy in here, and she was a big follower of Madame Blavatsky. So a lot of the secret doctrine and everything Madame Blavatsky was kind of writing about is also a part of this. What these books have turned into now is a mystery school in New York called the Arcane School, that is under the Lucius Publishing Company. And the Lucius Publishing Company is still around. They're still publishing all the books. And I almost joined this mystery school. And I decided not to because they're very weird. And they're located in the United Nations building. I still get all of their emails, and I find it very fascinating, but it's very interesting stuff. And what's very common in a lot of mystery schools, not just this one, I am in a mystery school and we do the same thing, but you meditate on a triangle. And you meditate on a triangle above the earth predominantly. And whatever your mystery school as egregore is, and whatever your intentions that you're setting for that time period under whatever mysteries you're learning, are envisioned into that triangle, and that triangle goes down into the earth, and that's the whole thing. So obviously the Arcane School is completely founded on all of Alice A. Bailey's writing, so it's not surprising that everything would be around triangles. But from my perception, when we're learning this, there are certain archetypes of energy, and these energies are said to be within the cosmos. Like, they're working together within the cosmos. And when we're meditating or we're focusing on a certain like spiritual evolution or things that we're trying to align with, we need to know how all of these energies are working and how they're all playing out within the cosmos, so that when we go to set that intention, we know exactly what energies we're working with. And this is also really common in not just esoteric astrology, not just Alice A. Bailey's astrology, which I think too is really important to know. And she's just one of the kind of pioneers of the Western side of this. But when you read some of the more Vedic astrologers, it gets back into triangles again. So it's hard to know how to utilize this in relation to a chart. That's the part I don't really get yet. And I think that is in line with what you're asking. Like, how do we look at it in the chart as a triangle? And I'm not sure if we ever do. We might just look at the, like we'd look at Uranus in the chart and we'd understand what Uranus's triangle is. and then we'd look at it in relation to maybe the sign that is there, and we'd understand what that triangle is. And then I'm guessing that the aspects might be like a whole other, like, it's going to be difficult for those triangles for that person if it's a difficult aspect, or maybe it's easier for that person to access that state of evolution through that triangle if they have an easier aspect. That's kind of what I am guessing, but I don't know totally. If you know on YouTube and you're watching this, write it in the comments and enlighten us. Teach us esoteric astrology. Does that kind of help though? Like,
yeah, it does, because it makes sense that I feel like I was looking at it a little too like literally or linearly, both, and more just thinking of it as a flow of energy between these planets or fixed stars rather than like an actual formation of like, when these planets are in a trine with each other, then this is like the energy you can tap into, which is kind of more what I was thinking, less about chart interpretation, and more about those planets talking to each other. But maybe just thinking about it more about those planets talking to each other all the time and not necessarily only when they reach a certain aspect.
yeah, I don't know. That's a good question. I like that though. I think that that's something that I'll kind of get frustrated with in astrology, where it's like, oh, well, we're not going to look at that because it's not an aspect, but then it's still there, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, but it's still there. And so that energy is still there. And I feel kind of like esoteric astrology has just such a complex way of looking at everything. It's really complicated and it's super weird. So I feel like that's why I'm attracted to it, is because it's like, but what? Like how, like it's just mind boggling. It feels really confusing, but I think that we're going to get it at some point. I think that you're onto something.
We're onto it.
Yeah.
Cool.
But yeah, all of that's good. I think you're right too, Christine, about the veiling thing. I don't know. I don't think the constellation's veiled. I'm kind of confused about that too, because it says these very specific constellations with very specific veiled planets. So I don't know if that means that it's when they're in the constellation. But it does break it down in the chapter. So it says the moon veils Neptune as exoteric ruler in Cancer. The moon's rulership represents the form nature, which is dominant in the longest stage of human unfoldment. When Neptune takes over, we are exposed to emotional impacts from humanity and thus need a higher level of development in order to interpret them accurately and handle them constructively.
I mean, the one thing I know is when you go to page 79, you have the constellation and planetary triangles table that she so wonderfully created and put in here for us. And like in the example of the first one where they use Neptune, Moon, Cancer on 162, you can go to ray 3 and you see Cancer, and you see the moon veils Neptune, the exoteric planet. And I guess I just thought that this table was just it was taking, you know, anything that was veiled and essentially compiling it into another table and then giving it reference numbers and it going into it a little bit further. I think it's just as basic as that, but because I think Neptune isn't necessarily veiled esoterically in Pisces. So that's the only other thing that kind of would make me think that maybe then when it is in Cancer, it's veiled. And so that's the part where I was trying to I was kind of looking at it like that, like, well, you know, where else is Jupiter, and is Jupiter always veiled? And then you look at Sagittarius and it's an esoteric planet and it's not veiled by anything, but
yeah, that makes sense to me.
But it's just where the sun is, or it's just, I guess what it comes down to is what you said though, is that it's what that the moon rules Cancer, but really the moon's veiling the powers of Neptune.
Yep, exactly.
think it's just where the sun and the moon are. I don't think it matters about the constellation. I think it's just, is the sun the ruler there? Yeah, well, it's blocking you from more.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think the one thing that was interesting that kind of throws it off for me a little bit is the cardinal cross being in there. Like
Yeah,
the
that was
whole,
interesting and
like the whole
random.
cardinal cross, yeah, is veiled by the sun, or Vulcan's veiled by the sun. Yeah, all that stuff is kind of interesting. Let's see what she says about that, though. That one is.
Because when did the cardinal cross become a constellation? Has she ever talked about
Well, let's
that?
read about it. She says it in this chapter. The sun is spoken
Oh,
of
yeah.
as being Vulcan as it transmits the cardinal cross energies of the Great Bear, Aries, and Libra. In a later reference during a discussion of Taurus, the Tibetan says that Vulcan is a substitute for the sun. The light from the eye of the bull, which with ever increasing radiance has guided the struggling soul, must give place eventually to the light of the sun. For Vulcan is a substitute for the sun. It is spoken of sometimes as being veiled by the sun, and at others it stands for the sun itself. That didn't really answer my question.
No, it didn't. That's why I struggled with this chapter.
Yeah, well, and it's hard too because it's like this is all simplified from esoteric astrology, and there's so much more in that book. So
Yeah.
there might be a little bit more discussion of that than what she's saying in here. Let me say again, the sun is spoken of as veiling Vulcan as it transmits the cardinal cross energies of the Great Bear, Aries, and Libra. So it's putting out the cardinal cross energies of the Great Bear, Aries, and Libra through Vulcan. Vulcan's kind of like a hidden catalyst. And Vulcan has that kind of Mars-like energy that we're about to get into, talking about the planet. So that makes sense to me with the archetype of Mars. But yeah, this is a hard chapter when it comes to understanding that and how it works. But I think that it is, I do like, because, we're still thinking of the exoteric, esoteric concept. So I think going back to kind of the personality versus the soul evolution and just kind of holding that in, like the sun and the moon are always kind of representing, that's why we have Leo and Cancer in there from an exoteric perspective. And then we have Virgo, Aquarius, Taurus from hierarchical, exaltation, and esoteric perspective, it looks like. So there's just so many factors that are brought into it. And then that's the other thing, is you have to remember all the exoteric, esoteric, hierarchical, and then it probably makes more sense when that's more ingrained.
Okay. Probably should move on.
Yeah, do you guys want to read anything else about the veiling in here, or do you guys want to just talk about the planets?
Talk about the planets.
I'm just looking a little bit. She does talk about the meditation work, but I think we'll just move on to the planets. All right, so Vulcan, yeah, she starts out, Vulcan is not really known to science or humanity. So let's go to Vulcan. Is this my Vulcan picture? That's Mars, I think.
You found a picture. I love it. I did look it up, by the way. In my chart, it is in Cancer in the first house, just like my sun. But I was curious, so I looked at James's chart, and his, as you know, he's sun in Capricorn, but his Vulcan is in Aquarius.
Oh, what degree is the difference between his sun and Vulcan?
His sun is 24 degrees Capricorn, and Vulcan is 2 degrees Aquarius. So they're still close, but still in different signs.
They're definitely wider apart than mine. What are yours, Danielle?
I was going to say that's about the degree of separation in my chart from my Aries sun to Vulcan. It's like 7 or 8 degrees.
Mine's smaller. Mine's 2.
What is yours again, Danny?
Mine is, I think Vulcan's at like 2 or 3 degrees Aries, and my sun's at 10 degrees.
Oh.
So it sounds like.
But both Aries?
They're both in Aries, yeah.
Oh, it's interesting that your Vulcan seems to be behind your sun. Like, clockwise, in the order,
Mhm.
because they go 210. But I think, well, at least for both mine and James, Vulcan came after our sun. It was like ahead of the sun.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what its kind of like orbit and transit times are, but
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Well, it sounds like it sticks pretty close to the sun, which adds to that veiling part. Um, Vulcan is not really known to science or humanity and is said to be a hidden planet close to the sun in an astrological chart. There you go. It's like I didn't even read the chapter. I did, though. The sun and the moon also veil Vulcan, which means that we might be able to substitute Vulcan's energies for those of the sun and the moon under special circumstances. The energy that streams from Vulcan is fundamentally the strength and potency which sets the world evolutionary process in motion. And Vulcan embodies energy of Ray 1, the force which initiates or begins, and that which also destroys, bringing about the death of the form in order that the soul may be set free. So Vulcan is very much like a Mars energy and a Pluto energy. It says it's the forger of metals, works in densest, most concrete expression of the natural world from the human angle. He goes down into the depths to find the material upon which to use his innate art to fashion that which is beautiful and useful. He stands for the soul, the individual, inner spiritual man or woman, implementing the soul's task upon the wheel of life. Hercules upon the fixed cross had to fashion his own weapons before he succeeded in the struggle, which refers to the art of Vulcan, who rules the inner person and guides our fashioning. It also says Vulcan helps condition and build the personality from the physical, astral, and mental natures, thus forming a triangle of immense creative potency. I do like the idea too, like since I was talking about the triangle meditations that you have to do in a lot of these mystery schools, like if we think about the triangle of Vulcan, like we're going to meditate on the triangle of Vulcan to initiate our will into the world to accomplish whatever the great task is that we have at hand. I feel like that's maybe some way to kind of think about some of these triangles. Vulcan controls the anvil-like process of time and strikes the blow which shapes the metal into that which is desired. And this is true today as never before. He is forging the way for the coming avatar who will at the right moment come forth, embodying the will of God, which is the divine will to do good, peace through understanding, and right relations between people and between nations. Vulcan rules nations at a certain stage of embryonic soul expression and governs their activities, fashioning instruments of war when war and conflict are the only means by which liberation can come. That's pretty intense to me. Vulcan is never an exoteric ruler, according to the Tibetan. Vulcan acts on the esoteric level with energies from Taurus and Virgo, where Vulcan is veiled by the moon. Vulcan acts on the hierarchical level with energies from Taurus. Keynote, endurance, persistence, rhythmic effort. And two, when she refers to the Tibetan is the being that Alice A. Bailey was channeling. So it's this, her guide, essentially, that taught her all of these things. Anything else you guys want to add about Vulcan? It's kind of cool, I think, that Vulcan stays like by our sun, and that's like our personality expression, our self-expression.
Yeah, I loved that first description of him as like this cosmic blacksmith. It made me so excited. And I do think it's really interesting that it does stay so close to the sun when it's kind of forging this personality expression. But yeah, I don't have too much to add other than I just really liked reading this kind of part of the chapter.
Yeah, it's cool. It starts out with Vulcan too.
It's interesting that for it to be like Mars Pluto, that they wouldn't have, that you'd almost expect a Vulcan then to be the ruler of Scorpio, and since Scorpio is ruled by Mars Pluto, but perhaps when you read more you start to understand its connection to Taurus.
Yeah,
I feel like it makes
the,
sense
like,
in the sense, yeah, like bringing things into form when Taurus is all about form. But yeah, I mean, it does like talk about that kind of destructive energy also, which is very Plutonian.
Yeah.
I guess if it's that duality, right? It goes back to the duality, Taurus, Scorpio.
Yeah,
Totally.
exactly. It's like the Mars of Taurus. All right, Mercury. The Tibetan calls Mercury the star of the intuition and transmuted manas. In mythology, Mercury is known as the messenger of the gods with winged heels to speed him upon his way. I feel like Mercury for us is pretty, we feel pretty comfortable with Mercury. It says Mercury, the messenger, brings bright gifts to man from the Pleiades, Capricorn, and Sirius. The Pleiades providing the light to shine upon the birth-giving mountaintop of Capricorn, and Sirius giving accolades of love. In its role as messenger, Mercury, along with Saturn and Uranus, is part of two great triangles that transmit energies from the Great Bear, Pleiades, and Sirius. One triangle filters energies from Leo, Capricorn, and Pisces through Saturn, Mercury, and Uranus, and eventually to the head, ajna, and heart centers of Earth, and then of humanity. The other triangle filters energies from three pairs of polar opposites, and the more spiritually advanced members of humanity are able to respond to them. Let's see, distributed through Gemini and Sagittarius. Mercury's direct line of energy comes from the Pleiades and is then distributed through Gemini and Sagittarius. And that's interesting too, because in traditional astrology, Mercury has its fall in Sagittarius, or its detriment. And so sometimes like when you're stuck in that perception of looking at the planets and you're with somebody with Mercury and Sagittarius, you can kind of see, that lack of groundedness that Mercury has more in Virgo. But I like this interpretation that it's distributed through the polarity rather than just one. And we're in that right now, the Gemini Sagittarius nodal axis. So it seems like maybe this is the Pleiades finally, saying it's time for us to get our shit together right now with everything. We're going to learn real quick. Let's see here. What else about Mercury? Mercury works upon the mutable cross and is concerned with the activities of humanity. Mercury indicates that the line of least resistance for humanity is harmony through conflict. For Mercury expresses Ray 4 energy, which is Buddhic and intuitional to humanity, which is the fourth creative hierarchy. This messenger, in his true character, is able to comprehend extremes and relate them divinely to each other. He helps us interpret experience, develop intuition, and to become aware of the divine plan. We note that Mercury is exalted in Virgo. Mercury acts on the exoteric level with energies from Gemini and Virgo. Mercury acts on the esoteric level with energies from Aries. Mercury acts on the hierarchical level with energies from Scorpio. Keynotes, intuition, consciousness, mind, communication, thinking, and attitudes. Anything else we want to add? Move on. Venus. I didn't switch to my planets. You know what's interesting, actually? Mercury's the one planet I forgot to get an image of. And I just it was funny because I was like, I have all the planets. I ran through them. Totally forgot about Mercury. And then I didn't even think about it. And then we get to Venus and I'm like, Venus. And yeah, it's very odd. Okay.
Did you have a Mercury planet and you just forgot to pull it up? Like you eventually got one or you didn't even get one anyway?
I didn't even get one anyway.
Oh, okay.
That's why it's weird, that whole thing. Venus brings through Ray 5 energies of mind and egoic consciousness, representing the transmutation of desire to love, wisdom, and establishing relationships between people and nations. Venus reveals the nature of Ray 2, which is consciousness or intelligent love, and expresses the basic energy of Ray 3, active intelligence, in its aspect of intelligent love. We can best take advantage of the Venusian influence to use the mind as the reflector of soul purpose.
Can I just interrupt really quickly? The way this paragraph started out is exactly what I was expecting for the other ones that we've already gone over them, but none of them really had talked about the rays. And I was expecting that in the same way in the last chapter with the constellations and the signs going through the zodiac, it was very heavy relating it to the rays. So I was surprised by that.
Oh, that like the other chapters were just kind of more on their own.
The like sub chapters or subsections. Yeah, they didn't talk as much about the rays up until Venus. It's like boom, all of the ray information in the very first paragraph.
Yeah, it does kind of feel like the whole beginning of the chapter is kind of setting you up in an interesting way, and then we get into something that's a little, I felt the same way, like once you get to the planets it feels more digestible.
Yeah.
But I feel like if you read Esoteric Astrology, the book, everything in this book will feel more digestible, because that book is so complicated, like how much it jumps around. That's why I'm really grateful for this book, because it's a really good thing to read and then go back to reading that other one. But yeah, it's a good observation. I don't know why she did that. There is more Ray stuff in Mercury, though. I just kind of skipped over it a bit. She says it later, too. Like, she says, Mercury, a Ray 4 planet, spreads the light of the soul, intuitive and illuminating upon world situations to interpret for us through our own illumined mind. So she does go into that, but she doesn't start each chapter out that way.
No. Okay.
At first, Venus stimulates desire and awakens the sense of duality. Venus has long been associated with the polarity between man and woman, and accordingly with the sex relationship. Desire is the underlying theme of the evolutionary and creative process. Later on, the emphasis on sex is transmuted to a more widely based love principle under the direction of the mind. When this occurs, we are involved with the relationship of the lower nature to the higher self, lifted up to a union with spirit. This is the divine marriage carried out and consummated upon the levels of soul awareness. And there's a quote that I'm assuming is by the Tibetan. Sex is but the symbol of an inner duality which must be itself transcended and wrought into a unity. It is not transcended by physical means or rituals. It is a transcendence in consciousness. And I think that that's the perfect example of the non-binary movement. And I do think it's interesting that it says that it has to be achieved through the mind, because the mind, when we think of Mercury is hermaphroditic and represents duality. So we experience, like in Gemini, Venus in Gemini is that marriage of the mind and the consciousness. So I think that, and we have Venus in Gemini in a long cycle this year with her retrograde, which I think for how crazy this year is and all the transits we've had, it seems pretty like that was a poignant time that we were supposed to be under. Venus places an emphasis upon intuition, wisdom, brotherhood, and spiritual will, representing the union of heart and mind. Venus sees issues clearly and achieves the point of balance where love, mind, and will meet. Through the ages, Venus has been involved with major human crisis of individualized consciousness and initiation achieved through the power of the mind and its purpose. During the age of Aquarius, Venus will again influence an expansion in consciousness throughout all humanity. The consciousness of group responsibility. I definitely feel like we're under that now. An interplay of energy from this triangle, Venus, Uranus, and Earth, combining the energies of Ray 5, concrete mind, Ray 7, ceremonial order and magic, and Ray 3, active intelligence, will manifest this consciousness expansion. And I think that it's interesting too to note with where we're at in history right now that we have had a rise of order and magic. I feel like in our country, like there's a lot more people outwardly practicing witchcraft, and I think there's a lot younger people finding spirituality outside of dogmatic religion again. And I think esoteric astrology talks a lot about leaving dogma and being more involved in the spiritual kind of connection to the cosmos. Yeah, and we're in that Aquarian age where there's kind of all of that coming out right now, I feel like. The influence of Venus will usher in the long hoped for era of love, wisdom, and peace on Earth. The 4 constellations that are ruled by Venus are Taurus, Gemini, Libra, and Capricorn, constitute a potent quaternary of energies, and between them produce those conditions and situations which will enable the initiate to demonstrate readiness and capacity for initiation. They are called the guardians of the four secrets. Taurus guards the secret of light and confers illumination upon the initiate. Gemini guards the mystery or secret of duality and presents the initiate with the word which leads to the fusion of the greater pairs of opposites. Libra guards the secret of balance, of equilibrium, and finally speaks the word which releases the initiate from the power of the lords of karma. Capricorn guards the secret of the soul itself and reveals it to the initiate at the time of the third initiation. This is sometimes called the secret of the hidden glory. We note that Venus is exalted in Pisces. Venus acts on the exoteric level with energies from Taurus and Libra. Venus acts on the esoteric level with energies of Gemini. Venus acts on the hierarchical level with energies from Capricorn. Keynotes: values, wisdom, relationship, and intelligent love. That's essentially the whole chapter, or the whole thing about Venus. Anything you guys want to add?
I thought it was really interesting when you were talking about, Venus being involved with the major human crises of consciousness and initiation, and how there's the relationship, the triangle between Venus, Uranus, and Earth, and how Uranus is in Venus's right now, and how we're having this huge crisis on Earth.
Yeah,
like, so many things.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, well, and it's interesting too, right? Because it says Venus will be a huge influence in the Aquarian age, and then Uranus is ruler of Aquarius exoterically. So yeah, that is really interesting.
Yeah, we're living in the time that this chapter was talking about.
Yeah, and then Uranus will be in Gemini, which, is also interesting to me. It makes me wonder if that will be the marriage of the heart to the mind, because, Venus is the heart.
Yeah, that will be interesting. It'll be interesting to see how people connect differently with each other when we get there, if we make it through 2020.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up though, because I'm having all this other insight about that, like Uranus and Aries, like Mars, depending on what system of chakras you use, like Mars rules the solar plexus, and you think about Aries and Mars and Uranus and, the solar plexus, and then we're now in the heart. When we get to Gemini, we're going to be in that throat. Yeah, that's interesting. Very interesting to me. All right, cool. Mars, the god of war, produces conflicts that lead to purification. A race 6 planet, Mars embodies the energies of fanaticism, struggle, strife, war, effort, idealism, and evolution. These forces, however, lead us from personal ambition to spiritual aspiration, where we seek to save the world. And Mars idealism is the power to see the vision and to direct our course towards it. It says Mars rules science, which is currently fundamental and material. This materiality is, however, lessening as Mars nears the end of its present cycle of influence. The color of Mars is red, which corresponds to the color of the bloodstream, through which Mars vitalizes, purifies, and stimulates all aspects and organisms in the body. The color red also associates Mars with passion, anger, and a sense of general opposition. The sense of duality is powerful, producing conflict. This conflict, however, enables us to use the energy of Mars to uplift our physical nature, emotional nature, and mental processes. Mars is closely related to sex, an aspect of the pairs of opposites. The activity of Mars arouses the entire lower nature and brings about its final rebellion and the last stand of the personality against the soul. The quarrel of the sexes is resolved in the highest aspects of the battle between the highly developed personality and the soul, which seeks to be the ultimate controlling factor. I like thinking about that. That's like another microcosm of the duality within the self, the personality and the soul. In the early stages of evolution in Mars, materialism, the fight for the satisfaction of personal ambitions, and the conflict with higher spiritual tendencies go steadily forward. Then the forceful dynamic energy of Mars is focused toward devotion to an ideal after it goes through that battle with the personality. I also really liked, she said Christianity is governed by Mars through Ray 6. It is a religion of devotion, fanaticism, high courage, idealism, of the spiritual emphasis upon the individual and his or her worth in problems of conflict and death. I thought that made sense to me because a lot of times, like, we'll read that Christianity is part of the Piscean age, and I feel like Pisces is like so like compassion and of service focused, and obviously there's huge parts of Christianity that are about that, but then we see so much war and strife and like the trail of death within Christianity of like, you know, like directing the will to convert, and the missionaries, it's basically like convert or die, you know, with like colonialism and all of that. So I think it's interesting, like the Mars part in there blends nicely to me. Mars is exalted in Capricorn. Mars acts on the exoteric level with energies from Aries and Scorpio. Mars acts on the esoteric level with energies from Scorpio. Mars acts on the hierarchical levels with energies from Sagittarius. Keynotes: desire, will to act, drive, physical energy, purification. Moving on. Jupiter. Jupiter, the conveyor of expansion, gives an inherent tendency to fusion. The fusion or unity is the subjective purpose of manifestation. On the mutable cross, the rays of the sun pour into and through us via Jupiter. Jupiter is the agent of ray 2, which the sun expresses cosmically and systemically. The cardinal cross brings about certain great points of synthesis as a consequence of both change and crisis, and Jupiter focuses the energies at this point. In the lower aspect, Jupiter fulfills desire and satisfies demand. In its higher aspect, Jupiter is the outgoing expression of love, which attracts magnetically to itself, which is desired, this time the good of the whole. Jupiter and Uranus working together are considered to be planets of beneficent consummation and employ the fullest eventual cooperation through ray 2 and ray 7. When we reach a very high level of evolution, Jupiter and Uranus produce a beneficent organization of energies in our equipment, which when complete enables us to escape from off the wheel and truly live. When we are fully awakened to spiritual and not simply material possibilities, the work of Jupiter will immediately intensify, and this beneficent ruler will lead us into the ways of peace and progress. Jupiter rules 4 signs, and each of them represent a different element out of the 4, which are expressing themselves in the 3 worlds of human evolution. Jupiter is exalted in Cancer. Jupiter acts on the exoteric level with energies from Sagittarius and Pisces and possibly Leo. Jupiter acts on the esoteric level with energies from Aquarius, and Jupiter acts on the hierarchical level with energies from Virgo. Keynotes: expansion, opportunity, faith, integration, and synthesis. Yeah, I like all that. What do you guys think? Yes, move on, Saturn. So I was trying to find a picture of Saturn, of what Saturn kind of actually looks like through a telescope, because there's a lot of really just like kind of cheesy pictures of Saturn. And this one, even though it's like an ultra, I think it said on it, the thing that I found out on was like an ultraviolet Saturn or something like that. But when I looked at Saturn through the telescope, it literally looked more like this to me than any of these photos. Like, it looks hella bright and crazy. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, that's awesome. I liked it looks like an eyeball with the rings on there.
Were you able to like see the rings separate from it, or did, like you said, it look like an eyeball, or did it kind of look like all like one thing where it's like a circle, but like?
It straight up looks like this.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, it's it was pretty cool. Jupiter too, like straight up looks like that. I mean, it's a little blurry because you can't, like through the telescope I was looking at, it's not like perfectly like that. It's more like this, but far, and kind of like these are all blurred, but you can see where the spot is, and Saturn looks like super bright, and you see the rings really well, and it just looks not even real. It's crazy. To me, I'm just like, is that even real? Are we being lied to? Just sticking it in the sky. It's all like a Truman Show. I don't know. Saturn is the planet of opportunity. Saturn, the planet of opportunity, is exceedingly active today, giving us difficult situations and crisis that involve free choice, discriminative and pioneering wise response and correct decision.
I just want to say that that is the only time I have ever heard anyone describe Saturn as the planet of opportunity, and I love it.
I think Saturn's a great opportunity planet.
Me too, but it gets such a bad reputation.
It's true. It's sad. I feel like my light is really bright in the screen. Okay. Yeah, I think that all of us who have Saturn in domicile are really lucky because we have a really positive relationship to Saturn. We're like, hey, Saturn ain't so bad, but it's because we're like the embodiment of what Saturn likes to be.
What's in domicile again, Analisa?
It's when it's in like its ruling sign. So Saturn, if it's in Capricorn or Aquarius, is in domicile.
Oh.
So we're all into it. And then people that have Saturn in a sign that it's not as comfortable with tend to have more issues with its energy, I think, from what I've read and what I've experienced with readings and stuff. She says Saturn provides stressful conditions and situations that lead us to struggle against wrong orientation. Saturn represents the conflict of the soul with its environment, which provides the conditions of suffering that the soul has willingly undertaken. When with open eyes and clear vision, the soul chose the path of earth's life with all its consequent sacrifices and pains in order to salvage the lives with which it had an affinity. Thus, through our suffering, we learn to discriminate, make correct choices, and decide upon higher values. Saturn is one of the most potent of the four lords of karma and forces us to face up to the past and in the present to prepare for the future. This is the intention and purpose of karmic opportunity. Saturn demands full payment of all debts, both from the form side and the soul side. When we finally free ourselves from karma, Saturn's power is completely ended and his work accomplished, for he cannot follow us onto the cardinal cross, according to the Tibetan. Saturn brings through Wraith 3 energies encompassing the nature of intelligent substance. Saturn represents the path of choices, deliberately applied purificatory measures, and the turning point. At the point of balance, opportunity comes with, makes choice and determination possible and inevitable. The choice offered by Saturn has to be made upon the physical plane, in our waking consciousness. Let's see. Saturn, along with Mercury and Uranus, is part of the two great triangles that transmit energies from the Great Bear, Pleiades, and Sirius. One triangle filters energies from Leo, Capricorn, and Pisces through Saturn, Mercury, and Uranus, and eventually to the head, ajna, and heart centers of Earth, and then all of humanity. The other triangle filters energies from three pairs of polar opposites, and the more spirituality advanced members of humanity are able to respond to them. Saturn's direct line of energy comes from Sirius and then is distributed through Cancer, Capricorn. We note that Saturn is exalted in Libra. Saturn acts on the exoteric and esoteric levels with energies from Capricorn, and Saturn acts on the hierarchical level with energies from Libra. Keywords: choice, discrimination, discipline, structure, and preservation. I feel like so far we still have Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto to go through, but for the most part, despite the complexity of esoteric astrology with the triangles and the confusion, I do feel like for the most part, each planet is pretty true to what we know from all the other astrologies. Like, it doesn't really change that much. What do you guys think?
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I also agree. And I really like I'm noticing with the Mars piece and then the Saturn piece, there's like this really positive, kind of opportunistic view of the struggles that come with these energies, and like taking maybe a higher spiritual look at things that can be challenging as like almost something to be grateful for, because it gives us this opportunity for our soul to evolve. I don't know. I mean, it's like hard for me to imagine ever fully freeing ourselves from karma, because I'm like, okay, but by being here, you know, we obviously bring karma into this life, and when we're here, we make karma. So it's hard to imagine like it's the concept of freeing yourself from karma. It's hard for me to grasp at this point in my evolution, but I did really appreciate her take on Saturn and all the planets so far.
Yeah, I agree with you. I feel the same way. I think that's why I like esoteric astrology. Like when I think about an evolutionary astrology, similar, I feel like when I think about the use for different types of astrology, I look at traditional astrology as like the use of it is going to be for predicting like the weather of your life. Like you're going to have challenges. It's just going to happen when Saturn and Mars are making certain aspects, if you look at it from that predictive lens. And then you have your personality in there, you know, that's like your natal chart. It's like your personality. And then esoteric astrology is like, but here's all of the ways that you can deal with it from an evolved place, where it's like not just victimized, or you're not seeing your own role in it. And I like that. I like utilizing that perception in astrology, because then it empowers you to be grateful, like you were saying, and see, you know, like maybe where did I create these circumstances for myself at various choice, you know, that's that Saturn, like where that Saturn wisdom is like, when did I create this choice that led me here? Or, you know, what's kind of that overall butterfly effect of my life that got me here, that is now, you know, it's like, you know, if your house burns down right now because you decided to live in California or stay in California, it's like we know at this point that we're under a crazy cycle climate-wise in this state. It's none of our faults, but by choosing to stay here, we know that it's something we're going to have to deal with. So let's say 5 years from now, our house burns down. You know, we know we made that choice to stay with a risk that that's something we could be under, and it's a consequence that we might have to live through. And then, you know, depending on our state of spiritual or soul evolution, we'll deal with it in a way that is productive, you know, or not. Like our own way that we're affected on the soul level and what we get out of that experience is how, you know, determines our evolution of soul. And an example of that, my mom had a weird stalker when she was younger who tried to kill her, and she was in high school, and he burnt her room down thinking she was in it. And it was her room was the whole wing of one side of the house, and all her stuff burnt down. It was all gone. Like her records, she had like some big cutout poster of somebody, like all this cool stuff that she had. And it was just all gone. And in that moment, like she just realized how not important any of it was, because she had her life, and how scary, like, you know, the room was rebuilt and all the stuff was gone. But for me as a kid growing up with her having that experience, whenever I would get really attached to something in the material, she would always try to like kind of tell me or ingrain in me why it was unhealthy to be emotionally attached to material objects. And she kind of like, you know, would use that experience of losing everything and persevering and finding strength and starting over as like a way for, you know, to raise her kids to kind of not be so materially focused or have those emotional dependencies. And it's not healthy to do that, because if you lose it all, you know, which everything is, and then, you know, the irony of it is like being in a mystery school now, like one of the first things they teach you is everything's temporary. Everything in life is on loan. So and it's not healthy to, you know, be in that attachment. We learn that in Scorpio, you know, and that's kind of Vulcan too. Like we're learning in evolutionary astrology how to embrace that stage of evolution and letting go of the personality, letting go of the material. So yeah, I think that that's exactly kind of the way that Mars and Saturn and Vulcan are looked at, is like, how do we evolve past these small attachments so that we can just constantly be in a state of love and wisdom. And I think that when she says we free ourselves from karma, I'm not sure if she, like, what she means by that, because I'm on the same page as you with that too, Danielle, where like, even if I was like a microscopic speck in my next life, like I would think that I'm influencing some frequency and something's coming, you know, like it feels so massive. But I wonder if it's like, just from the human perspective, like we just get out of the need to become human again.
Yeah, that could be, you know, like evolving to the point where we don't need a body. And it's been interesting thinking, like, studying alongside this book, like with evolutionary astrology, that the personality is a vehicle of evolution for the soul. And without the personality, we couldn't evolve, which kind of makes the relationship even like a little bit more of a paradox. But it's also, I think it still aligns that, like, once you get to that point where you have a level of mastery where you see how your personality has helped you evolve, that you are better able to control it and be less of, not feel like a victim of your chart. But yeah, it was interesting. As I was reading this chapter, I had this dream that I was like looking down at, like, it almost looked like a progressed chart or something, or like a natal chart with progressions. And I was like looking at these planets that were really bugging me out, that I was like, ugh, hate that placement. And, you know, there was somebody speaking to me, I was like, oh, but you can just move it over here. And then I was like able to move around the planets. Like it was like a toy, and it was really fun. And I woke up being like, oh, I can't wait to actually feel like I can do that someday.
Well, that's really, that's a power, that was your guides for sure. Cause that's exactly true. That's exactly what we're learning to do. We want to master all of these triangles, all of these archetypes, so that we're not, you know, like that's the whole point essentially, so that we can get off that. And I think that's the thing about being an astrologer that can be really empowering for the client, is when we do that for them. And Mary Kay Greer does that with tarot too. Like in that Tarot for Yourself book, she'll have you do a tarot spread, and you'll do the spread in like maybe a Celtic cross like kind of formation, and then she'll be like, okay, look at the cards and look at where they fell, and then move them, like just rotate everything over one and then interpret in that. And that was really cool for me, because what I started doing in a lot of my tarot readings was I would start doing it for clients, where I'd say, you know, we have this here, but we'd rather see it here. And I'd say, we don't want to see this at all, so let's pull a card for what we'd rather see here and see what comes up. And then obviously the tarot is a reflection of numerology and astrology. So it's basically just doing the same thing. It's pretty fun.
Super cool.
That's a really amazing dream.
It was one of the better ones I've had recently.
That's got to go in the books.
Yeah.
Cool. Anything else before we move on to the outer planets? All right, you're on Uranus. That's not it. This one. Uranus, connected with the Hierophant of the mysteries of initiation, rules the occult way. Occult consciousness is an intelligent fusing condition which produces a unification of our higher and lower selves through our intelligent use of mind. Trained occultists are mentally polarized and profoundly aware of the realities, forces, and energies of existence, and therefore free from the ordinary glamours and illusions that color the reactions and lives of average people. As the occult planet, Uranus stands for the exoteric science, which penetrates into the hidden side of form life and governs the period wherein we are not alert or conscious enough to seize opportunity and turn it into esoteric or soul ends, but can identify ourselves with more advanced aspects of form. Uranus then stimulates the will to be and to know simultaneously on all planes of manifestation and causes the great transference in human consciousness from intellectual perception to intuitive knowledge and then to inspiration. Uranus inspires spontaneous activity, which produces evolutionary development in both the natural and spiritual sense. This is the innate urge to improve conditions. The sun and the moon both veil Uranus, which means that we might be able to substitute the energies of Uranus for those of the sun and the moon under special circumstances. So similarly, like Vulcan, Uranus veiled by the sun symbolizes the effect of the soul upon personality. Uranus embodies the race 7 consciousness of organization and directed manifestation, and its work is analogs to that of Mercury. Yeah, so it's interesting because Neptune is considered to be the higher octave of Venus, and then Uranus is the higher octave of Mercury, which I like and makes sense to me. Let's see, Uranus initiates a new order of life and conditions, producing an understanding of the causes of things as they are, and the desire to change the old order and the old orientation into the new. So again, this is just in line to me with the evolution of Capricorn to Aquarius. So Uranus is exoteric ruler of Aquarius, and in Capricorn, we're maintaining tradition and structure and, you know, the way that it's always been. And then in Aquarius, we're evolving that into something new that's more appropriate for the future. And so it just kind of talks about that more. It says, this coming process of planetary service is truly effective when Aquarius rules and when our sun is passing through that sign of the zodiac. Hence the immense importance of the age of Aquarius in the next 2,000 years. And so we're just beginning that cycle, which I think is really just everything that's happening right now. It's just, we've been reading so much about the age of Aquarius and what's going to happen and all the prophecies, and it's happening. Like, we're in it, and it feels like all the kooks and quacks were right this whole time. The following lines of energy enhance the cosmic pull of Uranus. One of the stars of the Great Bear to the creative hierarchies upon Earth. Sirius through Pisces to Uranus, and then to hierarchy and humanity. Alcyone through Aquarius to Jupiter and Uranus, and then to humanity. So she brings up whatever that is. It's like, we haven't even been talking about whatever. Like, okay, moving on. Uranus, along with Mercury and Saturn, is part of 2 great triangles that transmit energies from the Great Bear, Pleiades, and Sirius. One triangle filters energies from Leo, Capricorn, and Pisces through Saturn, Mercury, and Uranus, and eventually to the head, Ajna, and heart. So this just repeats some of the stuff we've already been reading. So that, the constellation Leo, Capricorn, and Pisces with the planets Saturn, Mercury, and Uranus seem to be pretty big for the evolution of the soul in relation to these planets. Uranus is exalted in Scorpio. Uranus acts as the exoteric ruler with energies from Aquarius. It also acts on the esoteric level with energies from Libra, and then hierarchical level with energies from Aries and Leo, where it is veiled by the sun. Keynotes originality, freedom, change, spontaneity, and revolution. So nothing new, I feel like, with Uranus, other than us just understanding the triangles more and kind of that relationship. I do think it's interesting, though, that we have a lot, like our generation has a lot of people with Uranus and Capricorn, and just the fact that Uranus is in another earth sign during this time. Like, I don't know, there's something about that, but I don't know what else I'd add to that. It just feels poignant to me. All right, so Neptune, or do you guys have anything you want to add? Let's move on.
No, yeah, I'm good to move on.
I was just gonna say that Alcyone is it's I believe a star in, I always say it wrong, Pleiades. And so it's part of that. It's part of that, and there's a whole like Greek mythology associated with it as with all of the stars. So yeah, you can Google it.
Good to know. Thank you for that. That actually, now I remember looking at Palladius, and that makes sense that she
And
was
seeing it there. Yeah, because when you read it, I was like, I saw that when I was scanning the sky map one of those nights that you could actually see the stars.
See,
And I was looking for
having a Cancer in
Pleiades.
the group is good because y'all have really good memory.
People say that. I don't feel it to be true, but once in a while I come up with something.
Hey, you got it. All right, Neptune?
Yep.
Neptune, god of the waters, is the initiator during this world period. That's probably because of the Piscean age, I'm assuming. That's why she said that. So now, entering the Aquarian age, it would be Saturn and Uranus as our world initiators. That's scary. No wonder why it's
Wait,
so.
why?
Oh, well, the Aquarian age is what we've entered, and it's ruled by Uranus and Saturn. So she was starting this chapter out as saying Neptune is the initiator during this world period, because when this book was written, we were still in the Piscean age. And Neptune, is ruler of Pisces. So I think that's why she was saying that. And I was just saying it's scary that Uranus and Saturn are world initiators for the next 2,000 years. We were so judgmental.
But remember, Saturn's an opportunity.
Through much strife.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well, and Uranus wants to improve. You know, it's the divine discontent that we feel like after the illusions we were sold in the age of Pisces. So it could be better. It could be worse. We'll see.
I think it'll be worse than better, and then it's going to be bad again. That's my prediction. You can write it down in the book.
Artificial intelligence becomes the godhead.
Yeah, it might be better than what we have now. As much as it scares me.
Honestly, like, I think artificial, quote unquote, intelligence could become, like, illuminated. Like, Westworld. I'm obsessed with Westworld.
I love that.
It's terrible, but Westworld's great. So I think that it could be that, right? Like, AI becomes conscious to themselves, similarly to how we did. And obviously they're built by, something, which I think we were too. And then they're just a better version of us because they can survive. They can just build new pieces and parts and, do all kinds of cool things that we can't do because we're too fleshy.
This could be a whole separate YouTube video because I feel like we're about to go down a rabbit hole.
The mutable person leads the book club. Evelyn keeps me on track. Okay, so I like this. It says that Neptune's trident signifies the Trinity in manifestation. The term water covers several aspects of esoteric wisdom, including the whole concept of matter, the waters of substance, the ocean of life, the world of astral glamour and reaction, the astral plane as a whole, the desire and the emotional nature, the world of focused incarnation for the masses, mass existence as in Cancer. So that's interesting. And then let's see. This whole chapter is pretty good. It talks about everything that Neptune kind of represents. I'm just going to kind of go into more of the ray and the veiling stuff since that's more in line with the esoteric astrology part. So Neptune is on ray 6, which Mars is as well too. So I think that's kind of interesting since we were talking about the Piscean age being the Christian age, and then she said Mars on ray 6 rules Christianity, and then we have Neptune. That's just how my brain works. Neptune is idealistic, one-pointed, and devoted to an objective. Ray 6, which governs the astral or emotional plane of desire, can give us intense devotion to material things as well as intense devotion to spiritual values. And Neptune ray 6 is subjective and full of life. Neptune introduces the water of life into the ocean of substance and thus brings light to the world. This demonstrates control of the fluidic astral plane. The sun and moon both veil Neptune, which means that we might be able to substitute the energies of Neptune for those of the sun and the moon under special circumstances. The effect of the sun veiling Neptune can produce a potent effect upon the personality, symbolized by the astral body. Then as development advances, the emotion desired forces are transmuted into love aspiration, dedicated and oriented to the soul. The entire emotional or sensitive nature then responds to energies from the heart of the sun. Upon the fixed cross, the heart of the sun pours its energies through Neptune upon humanity. These stimulate the effect of the heart, throat, and ajna centers. We note that Neptune is exalted in Cancer. Neptune veiled by the sun acts on the exoteric level with energies from Cancer. Neptune acts on the esoteric levels with energies from Cancer, Pisces, and Leo, where it is veiled by the sun. Neptune acts on the hierarchical level with energies from Cancer. Keynotes: transcendence, dissolution of boundaries, inspiration. Yeah, it's interesting here too for that Neptune for exoteric is Cancer on here instead of Pisces. And then it says esoteric level Cancer, Pisces, and Leo.
Is that because in traditional astrology, Jupiter rules Pisces?
Yeah, probably. That would make sense. It's just interesting though, because in all the other ones, it's exoteric rulers, Jupiter and Neptune.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of weird. That's all those little things that I don't get all the way, but figuring it out. And it's interesting too, because Jupiter is exalted in Cancer.
Right.
So that's kind of interesting. Huh. 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 What does that mean? That's very, very interesting. All right, Pluto, unless we want to talk about, oh, I forgot to put my picture of Neptune. I thought that was pretty. All right. I guess they've discovered that there's water on Neptune too, which to me is just a trip because I feel like whenever they make discoveries about planets and you read like ancient stuff about the planets and the, like, okay, so we've had the god Neptune who rules water, and then we name this planet and we don't know anything about it supposedly. And then all of a sudden, thousands of years later, there's water on it and it's super watery and it's like named after a water god. Like, to me, that just means that we're either creating that because of the way that manifesting and creation works, or we're really fucking stupid and all this knowledge came from someone that knew way more than we did. They're like, here's your solar system, learn it, accept it, and then we had to get all skeptical and question everything. Set us back thousands of years. So funny. And then Pluto. Oh, and then we have the moon, actually. The moon's last for some reason. Okay, oh, because the sun and the moon veil the planet, so they're at either end, maybe. That's why she did it that way. Pluto is the Hierophant who cuts the thread of worldly desires. As the planet of metamorphosis, Pluto alters the shape and structure of all it touches, with scant regard for the sentiments of those who have labored to fabricate dream castles. That's just so funny to me. It touches with scant regard for the sentiments of those who have labored to fabricate dream castles. Pluto's Ray 1 power shatters the materialistic illusion of death, which has held the world in thrall for millennia. Pluto precipitates the process of transmutation and eventual escape through death and unfolds the significance, activity, and beauty of death and the work of the destroyer. Pluto is not itself an agent of doom, but clears the way for the final transfiguration, which ushers the immortal spirit into the realm of light. Pluto stands for death, or the region of death, and drags to the surface and destroys all that hinders in these lower regions. To achieve the final liberation, we experience the destroying power of death, death of desire, death of the personality, and death of everything that holds us between the pairs of opposites. Although Pluto delivers the spirit from the flesh, it does not annihilate consciousness. Evolved people do not fear temporary defeat by the forces of destruction because they know that they are and always will be immortal. And that is the Philosopher's Stone right there. Pluto is a non-sacred planet, functions in connection with the solar plexus. Pluto becomes active in our lives when we are becoming alive in the higher sense. Our lower nature passes into the smoke and darkness of Pluto in order that we may live in truth in the higher land of light. Humanity only experiences the positive aspect of Ray 1 potency as we near the level of evolution where we can become world servers. We note that Pluto acts on the exoteric level with energies from Scorpio. Pluto acts on the esoteric level and hierarchical levels with energies from Pisces and Scorpio. Keynotes death and rebirth, transformation, power, and regeneration. That all seems pretty in line with everything that we normally read.
The beginning of this totally just reminds me of all of my Scorpio friends who have ever sat there and talked to and just laid it all out there, and in one sentence they just shatter everything you've said and bring you so much perspective all at the same time, and it's a turning point for you. It's like oh, right, and then you move on from there because now you have this knowledge.
Yeah, totally. The Plutonian types. For sure. The moon, we're ready?
Yep.
Last
Do
but
it.
not least. In esoteric astrology, the effect of the moon is considered to be a thought effect, the result of a powerful and ancient thought form. This is very different, I feel like, than what we normally read about the moon. The ancient teaching speaks of it as veiling either Vulcan, Neptune, or Uranus. Accordingly, the Tibetan suggests that we work with the energies of the veiled planets instead of those of the moon. He tells us that Vulcan, Neptune, and Uranus determine or condition the physical, astral, and mental natures, thus creating the personality, and he leaves it to our intuition to determine which planet to use for any particular situation. The moon is the mother of the form, and the form side of life exerts a powerful control over us. The moon fashions and molds the form, bringing in both the feminine and masculine aspects of form building, the dual functions of father-mother. World mythology through the ages related the moon to goddesses, including Cassiopeia. I don't know how to say that. Did I say it right? Cassiopeia. Venus, Coma, Bernice, Andromeda, as well as Virgo the Virgin. In Egypt, she was Isis, Hathor, and Hecate. In Greece, she was Diana, Demeter, Proserpina, and Rhea. In these roles, the moon represents the feminine principle form, the subconscious, and the vehicle through which life expresses itself. The moon and the sun have long represented the primary pair of opposites, female, male, night, day, to humanity on Earth. The receptivity of the female aspect contains the effulgence of the male aspect. The coolness of the night balances the heat of the day. So then she talks about the blending of the subconscious and the conscious. And she says at the time of the full moon, when the sun and the moon are in opposition, we have an opportunity to balance this pair of opposites. At this time, over a period of 5 days, the moon and earth receive more reflected light from the sun than at any other time. This is the time when our planetary logos practices his intensest meditation or mediation. This in his cyclic point of contact, which brings through energies that can facilitate our work on the mental plane and enable us to meditate more successfully. We share in the achievement of the Lord of Shambhala. The moon in an ancient form through the planetary logos saw expression in the far distant past. Although it is slowly disintegrating physically, it is intact astrally and is therefore still closely linked with the astral body of our planetary logos and therefore with the astral bodies of all people. People who are spiritual and mental can profit by these full moon cycles. Those who are unbalanced, emotional, and frequently swept by uncontrolled desire and hindered, overstimulated, and psychically upset by these same cycles. Says the Tibetan, the veil of illusion is lit up at that time with the consequent result of hallucination, astral vision, psychic urges, and those misinterpretations of life, of overemphasis upon aspects of life which we call phobias, lunacy. We note that the moon is exalted in Taurus. The moon acts on the exoteric level with energies from Cancer. The moon acts on the esoteric level with energies from Virgo, and the moon acts on the hierarchical level with energies from Aquarius. Those are all really interesting to me. Obviously Taurus and Cancer not as much, but the Virgo Aquarius thing is, especially Aquarius. What do you guys think about that? I think too in the beginning, before I hand it off, she says it's considered to be a thought effect. And then I might kind of think that the Virgo Aquarius thing is more in line with that.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking too. It kind of has that mercurial or Uranian quality. But yeah, it's a different take on lunar energy than anything else that I've ever read. So it's very interesting, and like may take some time for me to digest. I just keep thinking about all the people I know that have Aquarius moons.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, that would be a good way to maybe think about it, I guess, in terms of like in manifest, what it looks like embodied. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like for me, and I'm sure you probably relate to this too, like with all of the like moon magic, goddess worship, you know, like all that stuff that I really am drawn to. It's probably one of my least favorite takes on the moon.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I was just thinking, when, you know, she speaks about kind of blending the subconscious with the conscious, and Uranus being this kind of higher level of consciousness, and then kind of equating that to maybe the blending of the moon and Aquarian energy.
That would make a lot of sense with the fact that the sun and moon veil Uranus, and then she says when Uranus can be tapped into, it can be like overcompensated for the moon or the sun. So yeah, that, I think you just got it. You cracked it.
We cracked the code.
Yeah, we're getting it.
Yeah.
It's a bunch of like mumbo jumbo in some ways, and then you start talking it out and you're like piecing it all together, and it kind of starts to make sense somewhat.
Yeah, it is a little bit heartbreaking to feel like the moon gets so like demoted in a way in this take.
You know, it's funny. I don't feel like I see it that way at all.
Really?
Yeah. Why do you guys feel like it's getting demoted? Why is it so bad?
I mean, it's not bad. I'm not saying it's bad, but I think that when you're learning about the moon from more of like a moon worship standpoint, where it's like in a lot of goddess culture and like kind of feminist spirituality, the moon is the polar opposite of sun worship. It's where the divine feminine is said to be. And so for me, like I have a really strong connection to lunar energy from that perspective, where I'm connecting with my, you know, Hecate, dark goddess, divine energy. And from an esoteric perspective, the moon wouldn't be the energy that I'm connecting with. It would probably be more like Neptune would be the energy that I'm connecting with, or Pluto maybe, from that perspective. And so it's just the way that the moon gets talked about here. She does make a reference to the goddesses, but it has more of like a linear, practical kind of side to it, and it's looked at as something that we're trying to kind of work past and maybe see beyond, which I don't think is a bad thing at all. But I think that my embodiment or perception of the moon or lunar energy is more esoteric on itself, rather than me having to see into another planet for that, if that makes sense.
It sounds like you're just being veiled. The moon is veiling you from all of the other planets that it wants you to access. So you're worshiping this moon, but the whole point is that you're supposed to be accessing the energies from everything else.
Yeah,
probably.
Yeah, I think that
Seems
was
to
the
be
part.
the summary of the chapter.
Yeah, I think that was the part that felt like it was getting a little demoted to me, was that it was like you can use Vulcan, Neptune, or Uranus, and you can just decide which one. Like, use your intuition, but use any of these other than the moon, kind of was my take on it. But yeah, I don't necessarily think it's bad. I have, natally, I have my moon in Capricorn, which is like such an uncomfortable sign for the moon. And so I struggle with my relationship to lunar energy, because it's not comfortable necessarily for me. So, I mean, this is great. If I could just bypass that and get to other planets, then awesome. But, I always feel a little bit guilty. Like, I'm like, I want to honor the feminine and really connect to that energy. So, I mean, it's nice to have a different take on it too.
Yeah, that's a good point. There's other things too, where the moon is said to be like the ball and chain of karma, like in Vedic astrology. I think it is. There's some like Vedic perspective that when we die, our soul goes to the moon and comes back through the moon when we reincarnate, if we're stuck in the cycle of karma.
That feels fair. That feels kind of in line, like in evolutionary astrology, like the kind of teacher that I was following. Like, Pluto is your soul and has a lot to do with the like level of desires that you've been working through in past lives, and maybe many past lives. But the moon tells a lot. Like, basically, like you have a PhD in your moon sign, like it really well, and so like that energy's been really strong in your past lives. So that feels like there's definitely karmic ties there, and feels in line with like what you were talking about with Vedic astrology.
Yeah, evolutionary astrology, a lot of their philosophies on karma just come from the East.
Yeah.
So it's like essentially just a westernized, like you're basically taking transpersonal astrology and then taking like Vedic philosophy and then putting it into transpersonal astrology that's karmically focused using, the Porphyry house system or whatever. So it's all really like, and same with esoteric astrology, like they refer to the Tibetan, and it's like all of this stuff and all these concepts, like all those Indian words that they're using, it's all Vedic. And so I am super interested in learning Vedic astrology for that reason, just because so much of what we're doing here, what we're talking about on our side of the pond, just is like, regurgitated Vedic stuff. So it's just really weird how fragmented our astrology is, because when you learn their astrology, it's all encompassed, but it's so complex because they've got their nakshatras, which, we have moon mansions too, but not all astrologers use the mansions of the moon, and so in Vedic, you just don't not use those. Like, you're going to learn all the nakshatras and you're going to use all of them in the chart, and those are all lunar. Those are 27 lunar goddesses that you have to learn in the chart. So it's just really wild that I just feel really stupid whenever I look at Vedic astrology, and I'm like learning esoteric astrology, and I'm just like throwing this book out. Like, I probably
yeah, I haven't even begun to tap. I want to get a Vedic reading.
Yeah, me too. Yep. Well, that was chapter 7. We ended on the moon, which I think is pretty cool, starting with the sun, ending on the moon. I feel like talking it out every time we meet definitely helps me feel like I'm wrapping my head more around it. Do you feel, Christine, since you had a hard time digesting this chapter, that it was kind of better to talk it out with the group?
Yeah, definitely. It really helped. And I think really the beginning, when you both acknowledged the beginning just being really hard to get through, and then getting into the planets, it was so much easier. And there was so many times I thought, maybe we should just skip this and just read the planets and then go back, or don't go back, whatever. But I just was having I wanted to be committed, and I got in my own way. But the planet seemed a lot better, a lot more straightforward.
Yeah, I agree with that. And that's good. I'm glad that it was easier to digest. It is hard though, because it's like you really have to open your mind to these really kind of out there concepts. And then there's so much, like for me with some of this stuff, I feel like there's so much little offshoot side studies that I've had to do to grasp one basic thing, just because the way, like, just the way everything was written back then too was so weird. Like the intellectual, like straight, you know, it just was, they made everything way more complicated and how it was written than what I think, you know, needed.
We're used to, yeah.
We should all write Esoteric Astrology for Dummies after this.
Yeah.
Part of idiocracy movement of the world, and we'll just really, we'll be like, hey, there's weird people that think there's 7 solar systems, and make all these graphs. Christine can make all the graphs because she's.
I can make all the tables, all the graphs, all the charts. I love doing it. We can order it in a better way. We won't reference chapter 9 all throughout the book before ever getting to chapter 9.
Yeah, I like that idea. We should try to find out what Carol Beckham's sign is. I'd be curious.
Oh my God, that'd be so
I
fun.
looked. Oh, she says it in here?
I think so. Wait, I think I might have projected that I thought she was a Scorpio because the way she wrote about certain things, but I can't remember now. I looked it up one time.
Oh, interesting.
Oh my God, I'll Google it. I didn't think you'd be able to find that.
Okay, so I've got 2 questions before we go. We'll end this at 8:30 at the latest, but my prompts are, oh, we already did where's Vulcan in your charts. Never mind, already did that. What did you guys think about the difference between the sun and the moon in relation to the planets? That was my only question besides the Vulcan thing.
I'm not sure I totally understand the second prompt. Like, what do you mean by the relation of the sun and the moon in regards to
the perception that the sun and the moon are separate and veiling everything versus the way that we normally think about it, where it's just kind of all there, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's like definitely a concept that I'm going to have to sit with for a while. Like on one level, it kind of makes sense, like in terms of evolving out of the personality level of the sun and the moon and tapping into more, you know, kind of like out there energies or more advanced energies, or just things that aren't completely like in our face every day, like the sun and the moon, like they rule life on this planet. It's interesting, but then on the other level, I'm like, but we're on this planet and the sun and the moon do impact our lives so much, you know, like they are life on this planet, like you were saying when we were first starting out. So it's hard for me to, like, you know, I don't know, disregard them as maybe more of like a filter, but that's kind of what the process of veiling seems like. It's almost like a filter.
Yeah.
But I also think I haven't fully grasped the concept of veiling.
I feel like you're onto it.
How do you feel about it?
Similarly, I feel like listening to you say all of that gave me an insight that wasn't too far off from the stuff we've already talked about. But I think that it's really weird that we see enlightenment as a need to get away from what gives us life. And just like, I think that we're just a very unique creature, that we create these concepts of, you know, like the sun, like either we're Christians and we think the sun is Jesus and we're worshiping and grateful, you know, for that, or we're, you know, Akhenaten in Egypt worshiping the sun because we figured out that the sun is all knowing, or we're pagan and we're worshiping the moon because we figured out that our periods are like ruled by the moon. So we're like, okay, we're so thankful, I'm this earth person, thank you sun and moon, you know, whatever. Then we realize Venus rules, you know, our agriculture in certain parts of the world. So we're like, thank you, Venus. And we do all this in that way. And then we get to this space where it's like, but now we're supposed to transcend and evolve. And it's like, why are we like that? Like, why are we trying to get off our planet? Why are we trying to destroy our planet to get off the planet? Why do we have this perception now, like in this, where it's like the sun and the moon veil all these soul evolutions we're supposed to go to? And like, why is that a thing? You know, why are we getting to that space in our consciousness? And then when you look at the 7 solar systems and we're like supposed to be evolving through them, it doesn't seem so crazy, like thinking about how we just are innately. Like we always have this like sense of lack, and like we're always searching for something else, and then we have this inclination to have to evolve spiritually. And a lot of times if people don't have spirituality in their lives, they're very depressed. Like either their spirituality is science and that gives them hope, and they're really into progress as a human through science in the physical and mental form, or there's that spiritual aspiration, like in the esoteric sense, where we have this belief that we'll leave the body and go to some dimensional reality that's better, which is, you know, where I like to live. So I feel like just all of this stuff is just really fascinating to me. And I feel like our ability to even conceptualize that makes me believe in the fact that this could be a likely reality for us if we wanted it to be.
Yeah, it was so funny when you were talking about that, just kind of like the desire to transcend and the desire to like leave where we're at. I mean, it's kind of the human condition, desire, whether, you know, like you desire money or security or love, or, you know, to spiritually evolve. Like desire is just so integral to our condition. But I was like kind of laughing because one of my meditation teachers like recently, you know, like talking about there being a lot of spirits who are not in bodies currently, and that bodies are really high in demand because that's how we evolve, is through being in a body. And it made me feel this level of gratitude for like being in this little meat suit and having, you know, my stupid little life or whatever, you know, and just being like, oh, well, this is a gift for my soul to evolve. And it makes me appreciate it a lot more.
Totally. We're in, the way that it's been channeled through me is that we've all chosen to be here, and we all are in like a Hunger Games kind of situation where, you know, we came down and we're like, all right, let's do this, bitch. Like, I'm here to evolve. And that we don't remember where we came from. That's part of it, because we're all in like a test right now. There's a test that we signed up for and had enough out of the body, had enough belief in ourselves that we could make this in some way or whatever. And when I was told that by my guides, I was really angry at myself. I was like, what the fuck is wrong with you? But it seems to be the general consensus is that there's no other way.
Yeah. But yeah, it
It's
is
not-
interesting to see, like, you know, you think about like like when astrologers started out, like those are planets that they weren't even able to see.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And so as we evolve as humans and our technology evolves and we find these planets and, you know, their introduction and importance in our life just kind of grows. I mean, especially according to esoteric astrology.
Yeah, we will build robot colonies. It'll be the next wave of evolution. The Aquarian Age, the robot colony on Neptune. The human evolution. All right, well, that wraps up Esoteric Book Club. I'm just going to do an outro. Let's stop sharing screen here. So I'm Analisa of the Mystic Parlor. My business partner, Evelyn, is not here, but she typically is here with us. And you can find us at themysticparlor.com. Our Instagram is at The Mystic Parlor. We also have an Instagram for Esoteric Book Club at Esoteric Book Club. We meet once a month. Right now we're reading Cycles of Opportunity. We're not sure what our next book is, but we usually read an esoteric centered book. Not always astrology. We've read plenty. This is actually the first astrology book that we've read for Esoteric Book Club. But yeah, you can find us online and feel free to send us an email if you are interested in joining. All righty. Thanks, you guys.